This is going to be part one of a multi-part series on leather holster making. Now I do have a few video reviews already on a few Kydex holsters that I've purchased, and the reason being is I simply do not like working with Kydex. It's just not something I find enjoyable, and it's not something that I feel that I have very much skill in doing, and it just takes a lot of time, and it's just easier for me to buy one than it is to make one. So the leather stuff I actually enjoy doing. It takes a lot of time also. It's a slower going process, as you'll see. But I just really like being able to have a lot of control over a lot of the little details along the way, where I kind of feel like the Kydex work is kind of a Hail Mary approach. You know, you kind of do all this stuff and you just kind of hope it works out. The leather stuff, it kind of is a slower going process. You kind of feel like you have maybe a little bit more control over the process. So this first part, we're going to be talking about the pattern designs. Now, this is going to be an inside the waistband holster. This is a pattern. This will actually be I've revised this pattern now probably 3 times to get the stitch lines right. So we'll see how this one turns out. The other two turned out okay. One of them was usable, the other one not so much. The biggest challenge with designing a pattern, it's actually the biggest part of making the holster, is coming up with a pattern. The biggest part is knowing where to put the stitch lines at. So you see these hard lines on here. This is where the stitch lines are going to be. And once you get your stitch lines established, you pretty much can draw the design up and kind of go from there and go with really any of the aesthetics that you want to go with. Now, since this is going to be inside the waistband holster, I do put some reinforcement on there to stiffen the mouth up, and that'll go on there like that. These two pieces obviously will be glued and sewed together. Now, generally speaking, what they say with coming up with your stitch lines for the width is that you take the firearm, actually would lay it down onto the piece of paper, and you would measure half the thickness in addition to the width. So essentially this gun's about, you know, a little over an inch wide. So the thickness of the gun is about just right at an inch. So what I would need to do to come up with the proper stitch line, a rough guesstimate, is just draw the lines here and here, and then add half of the thickness on each side, which would give you an increased distance of about a half an inch on this side, half an inch on this side. But then you have to be careful around the trigger guard, because the trigger guard is quite a bit thinner. So you kind of have to play around with that a little bit. Now, if you go by those as a hard, fast rule, what I ended up with was 2 3/8 inches on the first design between these two lines. That ended up being too tight. It didn't work for me, because the one thing that I do is I mold a taller sight channel. These XS Big Dot sights are taller than a standard Glock sight, so you have to be careful and mindful of that. Now, these are probably some of the tallest sights that you're going to find for an aftermarket sight, unless you go with a suppressor sight or something like that. And all I do to mold, and we'll cover that later, another part of the video, is I actually take a piece of cut off ink pen, and I will put this over the top of the sight. I'll probably actually use a full one. I'll probably run the entire length of the gun this time, because it kind of turns out a little bit better. But essentially all you do is you tape the ballpoint pen tube across the top of the slide, and that'll mold the sight channel. So that kind of interferes with your pattern some. So anyways, that's a very rough idea. So these stitch lines end up being 2 3/4 inch through here, rather than the rough, down and dirty, close enough, you know, to start with 2 3/8. And the thing with leatherworking is, with making holsters, unless you get lucky, it does take several revisions to get the pattern right. This one, for example, if I was to put leather snaps on here up high, it actually ends up riding a little too high. So actually what this one I'm going to do So I'm going to modify this just slightly. I'm actually going to put some belt clips lower here, so it's actually going to lower the holster down into the waistline just a little bit more. So that's basically how you come up with a pattern and what I'm going to be doing here for part 1. And I'll get this leather cut out here, and we'll carry on with the series. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned.